Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I've got some terrifying encounters to share with you. Before we get into those encounters, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version, written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those books are in the description below. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter. Paulding County, Georgia. It was roughly around the end of August 2011, and I was at my mother's house. The house is located in Burnt Hickory area of Paulding County, Georgia. She lives in a subdivision, but is still out in the country. I've always been and still am a night owl. I stepped out on her back deck around 0200 in the morning to have a cigarette. Behind her house is nothing but trees, shrubs, hills, and creeks. There is an abundance of wildlife in the area, the range from deer to coyote. I was a reconnaissance Marine for 8 years with multiple deployment, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been to numerous survival schools all over America, from Maine to California. Most of my life has been spent in the woods, and I understand what animals make what sounds. I do not unnerve very easily. So, back to the story. I was on the back deck smoking a cigarette when I heard this loud howl scream. The first howl grabbed my attention instantly, because I had only heard it one time, but I was unsure of what it was. So I listened with a bit more of interest at the second time, and I'm trying to run everything through my mind to figure out what it was. I knew it was not a deer or a coyote because the howl was so deep. So then I started to think about my surroundings. There's a highway a couple of miles away, so I thought it might have been a big rig semi. Then I heard it again. That option was completely ruled out. So I started to think, what else could it be? Perhaps it was a generator running out in the woods. Again, I heard it, the howl, not a generator. I had run through so many different scenarios that I was starting to get freaked out. The howl was from a living creature, and it was much larger than I. Each howl lasted approximately 5 seconds, with 10 to 15 second rest between the next. I stood out there for about 5 minutes before listening to this before I was freaked and headed inside. I immediately ran up to the computer and Googled howling sounds in Paulding County, Georgia. There were several websites regarding howling in the area, but most of them referring to Pickett's Mill battlefield. Then I started looking through a website and I came across some of the audio submissions from Ohio. Once I heard them, I nearly crapped my pants. The howl was to a T of what I had heard. The only difference was mine. Sounded much deeper, closer, and I didn't have dogs barking in the background. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I started looking at other posts from Paulding County and Bartow. What they all had to say was very freaky. Then I started checking out time frames and where they were made. During those time frames, there was construction in the area. And when I heard my sounds, they had just recently began construction in the area. Not sure if there's any connection with that. I did bring it up to my wife the next day, and she could hear the fear in my voice as I talked about it. So many countries have stories of cryptid that date back to who knows when. While in Afghanistan, I was speaking to my linguist, and they also have their own version of creatures. When they described it for their country, it was just like how we stateside describe ours. One of the biggest things they mentioned about, though, was the howl. They said their howl sometimes sounds like a laugh. I would describe it as a Mexican war cry. A lot of our equipment over there has IR capability, and your jaw would drop if you see some of the images we capture on camera. They're so large on the camera that the closest thing it would resemble would be a bear, but I don't think bears are in the Helmand province of Afghanistan. Things that make you wonder what is really out there and how well they've adapted to their environment. Today's second encounter, Dodge County, Georgia. My father-in-law hit and killed a creature 30 years ago in his car. He called DR, they took it away. He was never heard anything back from it. 6 to 7 foot tall, covered with hair, walking on 2 legs like a man. This is the interesting thing. Snout like a bear or hog, long fangs. 30 people gathered around to see it. I don't think it was a Bigfoot, but it was something weird like a werewolf. I've seen Bigfoot on our property, wood knock so loud it scared me to death. Terrible smells like I can't explain, and footprints in the fields. Small monkey-like creatures in the trees. I'm not on drugs. I know I've seen these things. Again, after speaking to the father-in-law on phone, even though the incident took place after 30 years, the events were still fresh in his mind. He even recalled the name of the wildlife officer that called him to say they retrieved the body. It was between 7 and 8 o'clock. It had just gotten dark. My father-in-law was driving alone in his Gran Torino on Roddy Highway, and was just about to cross a small bridge when a 5-foot-tall creature emerged from the right and ran on 2 legs into the road. My father-in-law at this point corrected his daughter-in-law's previous description of 6 to 7 foot tall animal. He was traveling about 50 miles an hour. It was clear with no fog. Father-in-law stated several times that this creature was definitely running on 2 legs. The animal ran directly in front of his vehicle. He hit it squarely in the center of the grill and hit it quite hard. Not a glancing blow. The impact knocked the creature off the road and over to the side. The father-in-law got out of the vehicle, walked over to the creature, and was amazed at what he was looking at. He described it as first looking like a mixture between 3 and 4 animals. It had coarse hair like a boar, but it was multicolored. Gray, brown, white, and black were the prominent colors. He did notice no visible tail. It looked to weigh about 70 to 80 pounds. It had a long snout with fangs that protruded out of its mouth. The front quarters ended in paws like a kangaroo, not hands. The witness stated that it definitely ran on 2 legs and was not hopping. It looked like a mixture of a wolf, a boar, a man, and a bear. Several people came out of their homes to see the creature themselves. Other people who drove by the spot also saw the creature. The area locals spoke about this for many years. The creature laid there on the side of the road overnight until early the next morning, when he received a call from the wildlife officer saying they had picked the animal up and were disposing of it. They never spoke about what it might have been. The conversation was all business. Efforts to locate the officer ended with the discovery of his passing in 2016 and his wife a few years before. They had no children. The father-in-law stated that before he hit and killed the animal, there was much discussion in the area concerning very unusual livestock kills. Individuals were losing pig, cow, calves, horses to an unknown creature. Today's third encounter comes to us from Illinois. It all began with my father-in-law. He had an encounter with something huge and making an unfamiliar noise he said he had never heard before. He is a 70-year-old man and a great guy. I recall laughing and making fun of him. Then the tables turned. I was in the woods, alone, hunting in 2015. I was in my stand and had several deer come in, but they seemed very skittish. I drew my crossbow down on a nice buck and pulled the trigger. My arrow seemed to find its mark. I allowed about 45 minutes to go by, and it began getting dark. As I climbed down on my stand, I began hearing some unusual noises, kind of like screaming, growling noises. Now I'm soon to be 50 years old myself, and as my father-in-law said to me, these were sounds that I had never heard before in the woods or anywhere else. I called my father-in-law and told him that I had a deer down and asked if he could meet me out in the woods to help me get it out. He told me he was at Terre Haute, Indiana, and that it would be close to an hour before he'd even get home. I was too embarrassed to tell him that I was feeling pretty uneasy. I tried to keep him on the phone, but he had to get off, so I began tracking the deer. I found a really good blood trail, and was sure that the deer didn't go far. As I started downhill, I began hearing the noises again. It was as if I could feel the screaming, growling noises throughout my body. I kept hearing what I thought may have been falling branches or something. I looked up the side of the hill 30 yards from me and saw a silhouette of something huge. I quickly headed out of the woods and continued to hear the noise all the way out. I called my father-in-law and told him about my encounter. He laughed and said, "You made fun of me." We returned the next morning to find a blood trail where I left off, and we knew the deer had to be close due to the amount of blood. And then it was as if the deer just vanished. We began working in circles and found nothing. There was a steep cliff to the east of where we found the last blood. We looked down toward the creek and found nothing. But the smell in the woods was as it was the night before. A very strong, pungent odor. Kind of a cross of something dead. And piss from many different types of animal. I felt eyes were on us the whole time we were out there. We went back several times without success. Then in April, I went out to the same location mushroom hunting. I found that the woods were very quiet. I didn't find any mushrooms, so I headed out through the north end of the woods to look for deer sign. When it hit me, I smelled the smell, and it was strong. I began hurrying to get out of the woods. As I got to the edge of the woods, to where the area we call a grassy area, there was a footprint, a single footprint. It was a left foot, and it was very large. The print was good and very detailed. You could see toes and everything. I wear a size 13, and this print was way bigger than my foot. This area is about 3 miles from the Kickapoo State Park in Illinois. I've never been frightened in the woods in my entire life. I spent my whole life in the woods hunting most of every species out there. I coon hunted in the dark by myself, and I've never been frightened as I was with this encounter. Today's fourth encounter comes to us from the great state of Washington. On June 22nd, 2020, I was parked just outside of Swan Bay launch site. That was that lake on a logging road. About a quarter of a mile from the launch site, heading east, take a left onto that logging road into the clear cut. I parked approximately a quarter mile in, and my RV could be seen by the main road. I was accompanied by my wife and my 15-year-old son. We had built a fire, and when the sun set, I mentioned to my wife that Sasquatches are known to answer howls. I'm on the internet constantly. I'm a firm believer after reading Dr. Meldrum's book, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science. I made a howl like the 1994 moaning Howl, Ohio call. I'm a trained vocalist, and I can project my voice loudly. I cupped my face and let out that howl. It was answered. I was facing east and let out a howl every 30 to 60 seconds. That was answered progressively closer. Astonished, I kept it up. And the return was always closer. My wife fled into the RV in fear my son would not come out. I was not in fear, but in hopes of seeing something. I didn't have my cell phone with me to record the howls. I grabbed my .44 Magnum revolver just in case, and a flashlight scanned the trees in hopes to see an illuminated pair of red eyes. As soon as I had my pistol in my hand, there were no more returned howls. I was never in fear but in awe. There must have been 10 to 12 howls and returns. With the first reply, I would guess whatever it was at least a mile away. With the last, quarter to an eighth of a mile, if not closer. We returned home, and I had my wife and son listen to the 94 Ohio calls. They were shocked at what they had heard. Just a little bonus for you guys tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I kind of wanted to get something else out there for you guys to listen to. I hope you guys enjoyed the Alaskan ghost town of Port Lock. Definitely creepy. So here was 4 other encounters to go along with it. Enjoy, guys. Thanks.